like to welcome our panel joining us for the session: Roddy Stewart from Just Enterprise, Sarah Stone from Sam Taylor, and Neil Young from P4P. Welcome, everyone. You'll notice that we've had some last-minute changes in the panel lineup. So unfortunately, Pauline Gordon, who was going to chair the session, is not able to make it this morning. And again, one of our panel members, SDP, is unable to make it as well. So we'll have some good discussion and listen to the chat. But first, I'll tell you in terms of the format for the session. So what I intend to do is we'll hear from each of our panel speakers. So we'll get their thoughts on whether they think procurement helps or hinders collaboration. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions or give us your thoughts throughout the session using the chat function. So that will be open for the session. So please use the chat to help inform the discussion. And also just to say the recording is being streamed live and will be available on the YouTube channel. The final thing I want to say before I hand over to our panelists, and just to put it into some kind of context. So the question today is, does procurement help or hinder collaboration? And just to say what we mean by collaboration and procurement for this discussion. Collaboration, we mean two or more organisations working together to deliver a product or a service and achieve ultimately a business benefit. And in terms of the procurement process, we're looking at the procurement process cycle. So through from identifying what the need is, the gap in either a service or product, through to the sourcing or tendering stage. So what I'll do is I'll ask the panel to start. I'm going to take it in Roddy first, and then Sarah will speak, and then Neil, just to give us their thoughts on whether they think procurement helps or hinders collaboration. If you could just tell us a wee bit about your organisation as well before you answer the question posed, and I'll hand over to Roddy.
Thank you, Yvonne. My name's Roddy Stewart. I'm a business advisor with CIS, but I guess I'm here today representing the Just Enterprise Partnership, which is a national partnership that provides support to organisations who are seeking to become more enterprising, develop, grow, identify new income streams, and clearly tendering for public contracts is a way of doing that. I suppose to answer the question, I'm going to fudge it, which will probably annoy Yvonne, but I think public procurement provides a great opportunity for collaboration, but does it always support effective, beneficial collaboration? Not always would be my answer to that. I think where public procurement is done well, when the commissioner and the procurement officers have designed a good spec, where they've consulted with the market and indeed the service users, they've given the providers within that marketplace a chance to collaborate or begin the process of collaboration, because I'm sure there'll be a recurring theme today. It's not something you do quickly. It takes time to develop those relationships, but where the spec's good, where there's consultation with the marketplace, where there's an understanding on the buyer and commissioner side of what the marketplace can deliver, and time is given to allow that to take place, then it can support good and effective collaboration. But I have to say, I'm not quite sure who is going to be in the audience today, so if there's any public sector buyers out there, there are examples where the procurement process doesn't always work well, and there can be good reasons for that. We know public buyers are really stretched under an awful lot of pressure at the moment, but where the spec is wrong, or understanding of the market is absent, or the timescales are too tight, then the opportunity to empower, to deliver that effective collaboration isn't always there. I could go on, Yvonne, but I don't know how long you want me to talk for. Maybe I'll stop there and let Sarah come in. Happy to pick up on that after.
Thanks, Roddy. Okay, so focusing on the specification, understanding the market, and the timescales there, Roddy.
Yeah.
Sarah, what's your thoughts?
What Roddy said, he's basically just you've just basically said my answer.
Stolen your thunder.
So sorry, just quickly introduce myself. I am Sarah, and I run a small organisation called Santala, and we work with very large private sector organisations to help them find ways that they can create social value. And I think, yeah, my answer is basically what Roddy said. It's an interesting question. It's a really interesting question, actually, because it doesn't have a straight answer. And I think my answer would be it could help collaboration. It could help encourage it enormously collaboration with and amongst social enterprises. But at the moment, I would say it doesn't. I wouldn't say it's, I probably wouldn't go so far as to say it's proactively hindering things. I don't think it's intentional. But I think that there are natural barriers which the procurement process creates, and Roddy's, talks about them, which will need to be removed if encouraging collaboration is something that we want to do. I just thought I would kind of make 3 points really, and one is just to think that I think it's important that we should start really by reminding ourselves what procurement is for as a function, because procurement as a function and a process is about helping organisations buy things effectively. And in the past, we've measured effectiveness by price. So we've said, buy things the cheapest, get the best possible price. But over the last sort of decade, there's been a kind of shift in procurement towards quality. I mean, price is still very important, but quality is increasingly, evenly, if not occasionally, outweighing price. And so as part of that, when we talk about what do we mean by quality and what do we mean by finding the best supplier, well, it's looking at how suppliers deliver their products and services. I mean, that's what when I talk about social value, that's what I'm talking about, the social value that a company delivers, how it delivers its products and services, as opposed to the economic value being the price. So I'm not talking about whether or not a company donates money to charity or whether they buy benches for a park. I'm talking about things like whether they employ local people, do they look after the environment, do they use recycled materials, do they treat the staff fairly, that kind of thing. And when you view it through that lens, it's really obvious that social enterprises offer much more of that kind of social value, because it's just embedded integral into the way that they do business. That's why they're a social enterprise in the name. And so if you look at it through that lens, it's kind of not that much of a jump to say, well, if procurement is about buying but ensuring that we find the best supplier, then it would make sense that we want more social enterprises in our supply chain. So they're going to, if they're effective, tick more of those boxes. And so collaboration is very important because social enterprises are traditionally fairly small scale. There aren't as many of them, and they're not able to deliver a lot of the big contracts the public sector needs. So I think to me, it seems really obvious that it should be something that the public sector procurement, and not just public, actually, private sector function should make a priority. And that kind of takes me to my second point, which is that the procurement process could offer a brilliant tool to stimulate collaboration as a way of encouraging more social enterprise into the supply chain. But that won't happen unless a strategic decision is made at a policy level by governments and buyers that it's something they want to do, that it's a priority for them. Because I think, Roddy, you talked about, it takes a lot of time. There's a lot that needs to change and you need to resource it. So it has to be something that the buyer is consciously making a priority in order for some of the other changes that need to happen. And then my third point is that when we talk about collaboration, I don't think we should just be talking about collaboration between social enterprises. So, I mean, you guys know me, my passion obviously is transform the private sector, but I think the real opportunity lies for collaboration with the private sector. So embedding social enterprise in the supply chains of large suppliers to help deliver contracts and create social value. And I think the opportunities for changing the way some of those organisations work is massive if we can do that. So that's what I'd like to see more of. Companies like, Serco, Amy, Capita, Mighty, collaborating with social enterprises and embedding them in their supply chains to help deliver contracts. That's it.
Thanks, Sarah. That's really interesting. Obviously, focusing on your social value and looking at it through that lens, and we'll come back to that. I've got a couple of questions, and I'm sure we'll get some more through the chat function from our audience. But I'll hand over to Neil just for his thoughts, last but not least.
Well, you saved the best for last. So my name's Neil, and I work alongside Yvonne in the team. I have we think about the question and kind of listed some thoughts. In terms of helps, I think it, first of all, it gives organizations a common goal to work towards, which you might not have if you're trying to kind of proactively develop a consortium. And that's something that we see quite a lot, so that consortia can maybe struggle to get off the ground or lose momentum because they don't have that common goal or kind of like carrot really to work towards. I think it also kind of forces collaborations, and that might be where perhaps lots within a contract are merged, or maybe we're in a situation, and this is one that we see quite a lot, obviously, because of our focus on third sector, where funding streams, multiple funding streams, where organizations have been funded separately are then merged into one tender. They're forced to collaborate in order to keep the lights on, keep doing what they're doing. And also in terms of helps, if a tender mentions or encourages collaboration in the first place, that might actually just plant a seed. And even just the ability to submit consortium bids, I think helps. And in terms of hinders, procurement is not an easy process to navigate if you are a collaboration that's not using a lead and sub model. So for example, if you don't have a financial history, if you've set up a cooperative, for example, or in terms of timescales as well, and we see this quite a lot, it's just too short for many groups. Because you have to develop a partnership on top of what also already can be quite a demanding, like timescale in a tender, sometimes just a matter of weeks. I think I'd also add that forced collaborations don't really have the same level of trust, obviously. They don't have a kind of an existing relationship, and maybe collaboration just isn't encouraged enough by buyers. It might be like buried within a tender as opposed to like front and center of the tender document. I'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks, Neil. A bit about sitting on the fence there in terms of help and hindering. But you're right. I mean, in terms of our experience in P4P, we certainly sort of sign up to the theory that collaboration does deliver innovation. So it's quite crucial, particularly in terms of sustainable procurement duty, you know, and what you can achieve. And recently, Scottish Government did a sort of independent evaluation of the sustainable procurement duty, and that was one of the findings, if you like, for the report, that either buyers weren't sort of recording and reporting an innovation, or they just weren't looking at it. But there was certainly a gap there in terms of much more to be done around that delivering innovation and how we can do that through procurement. So we would definitely say that collaboration is one way to do that. Just coming back on a couple of questions that I've got, and as I said, please use the chat function if you want to ask the panel anything, and if you've got a particular question for one of the panelists, just say who that is, or if it's just a general question, happy for you to just put that through the chat. I'm just going to come back to Sarah just around that sort of social value and how important it is to your corporates.
Really good question. Depends who you talk to. I'll be very honest, depends who you talk to in the corporates. I think if the corporates are, and a lot of the large companies are all suppliers to the public sector, and you talk to the part of the business that's responsible for delivering and selling those products and services to the public sector, they'll tell you it's really important, because obviously Sustainable Procurement Duty, Procurement Reform Act, Social Value Act in England, you know, it's increasingly something they're seeing across the board that buyers are asking for, and they don't know how to deliver it. So they really do struggle to kind of understand it, and that's why I love what I do. But yeah, I think it is really important to them. But I think there are some of these organizations are really large, and so, you know, there are other departments within them to whom it wouldn't be. But that's a very honest answer.
Okay.
For a recorded webinar.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to Neil now, and just, you mentioned something just as simple as putting in the scope of the tender. You know, collaborations are encouraged, or wording to, I suppose, put it into people's heads and make them think about collaboration. What else in terms of buyers do you think that could be helpful, if you like, to prompt organisations to think about working collectively or developing consortium?
Notice of a contract coming out, and obviously pins are used by quite a lot of buyers, but more notice in order to get sorted and start having discussions.
So at the earliest opportunity.
Yeah, it isn't, the notice period really is something that can prevent a collaboration, or I suppose a more equal collaboration from being formed. Otherwise, you really are most of the time forced into a situation where you have to have an organization that's, I mean, there are, if you want to get like, go into quite a lot of detail, you can rely on the capacity of your subcontractors or your members, I suppose, to get around and not having the financial history side of things. But that's really like a, it's not, that might not actually exist, and that one of the members might not want to take on that kind of burden, if you like.
Okay, and just coming back to you, Roddy, you talk about, you spoke about understanding the market. I always say that one of the most important parts for me is that first stage in the cycle, if you like, the first stage in the process, once you've decided that there is a gap, and how you engage and how you understand the market. Can you tell us a bit more about your experience in terms of, I know you've worked across the public sector with buyers, and what are the sort of barriers just around that in terms of engaging with the sector?
I think the biggest barrier based on the buyer side of the fence is time and resource. I think having worn a number of hats in this area, but talking to buyers over the years, most buyers would like to engage and understand more about what the sector can offer, but they are very, very busy. Huge pressures, financial pressures, time pressures. I think that is the biggest single barrier. Where the process works well, and Neil mentioned PIN notices, prior information notices, they can be used to trigger or as part of a market consultation exercise where the buyers maybe don't understand what's out there. There are examples where the buyer and commissioner does understand who their supplier market is, and when that is in place and that understanding is well established, it enables consultation, it enables a specification, the outline of what the procurement's all about to be well written, deliverable, credible. But all that takes time and understanding, and again, buyers move about as well. So like everybody, particularly in the public sector, they tend to move jobs as well. So my own experience, sometimes you work with a buyer who really understands the marketplace, and then they move on, and somebody else who's maybe less familiar with what's involved and doesn't have that knowledge as well, so that's lost, and that can be reflected in what comes out. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but the crux of it is it's time and resource on the side of the buyer and the commissioner. Do they understand what's out there, and do they have time to develop a specification based on consultation that will reflect the particular need of the service that they are looking to deliver?
Okay, thanks. You mentioned PIN notices there, which you know, we get quite excited when we see PIN notices where they want to actually have industry days or meet the suppliers to have that chat and help inform what's in the scope of the contract. But the downside of that is that the PIN notice can actually shorten, or will actually shorten the overall period, and sometimes that is the motivation for using it. But you know, we'll say that the PIN notice is an opportunity, certainly, in this to bring organisations together, whether they're from private social enterprise or, you know, the wider SME market together, and look to see where the opportunities are to partner, and also to see who your competition is, obviously. But we would hope that they would look to collaborate. I've got one question, and not for anyone in particular. So to encourage more collaboration and more involvement of social enterprise in delivering contracts, should the procuring organisation specifically state that they specifically want a collaborative approach in the procurement documents, or does that not make much of a difference? Do you want to go first,
Yeah.
Roddy?
Oh, Sarah was about to die. I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll be brief. I think it would be helpful, because that way that sends a signal to prospective bidders that, yeah, collaboration is expected and welcome. Sometimes it can be implied when you're going through a tender document, but for an upfront clear statement that yes, the purchasing body fully anticipates or would welcome collaborative bids to deliver this service or whatever. I think that would be helpful. But here's the but coming. Again, the specification, the tender must be designed to enable that as well, because without that, then those few sentences up top are pretty meaningless.
Okay.
Sorry, Sarah, I think I cut you off there.
No, because that I knew your answer is always better than mine. But I was, what I suppose for me as well, it's not just about collaboration for collaboration's sake. It's about collaboration as a mechanism to get social enterprises into the supply chain. And so I think it's about the procurer stating that they that's what they want. You know, we want to see social enterprises delivering this contract, whether it's in its entirety or as, you know, as a subcontractor to a larger main contractor, if that makes any sense, and that we would welcome collaboration as a means of delivering that and achieving that, because I think that says two things. You would hope that if it's a contract where you could put together a collection of social enterprises to deliver it, that they would be coming to you, Neil, or, you know, coming to you beforehand and saying, what do you reckon? And you can, to give you some time, we think this could be done. We've got this big contract, to give you some time to go out and build those, I've forgotten the word. Sorry.
Consortia.
Thank you. I knew it began with a C. Consortia. But the other thing you see by putting it in and saying is it's a big, massive flag to the private sector suppliers that are also bidding that this will help them win it. And anything, you know, you asked me at the beginning, how important is it to them? I think anything that helps them win a contract is important. And so whenever they see, you know, if they see it in black and white, we want to see social enterprises delivering this, they will make that happen. So yeah, I suppose yes is the answer.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't just say collaboration, because that doesn't really mean anything unless you're us.
Yeah.
But there was the second part of the Anne Michelle's question is, do social enterprises look at Public Contract Scotland?
Yeah, I was going to come to that after I asked the first part. I never
All
like
right.
doing that two-part question at once.
Well, I was going to ask what you guys thought about that, because you're much better at that than me, more familiar with that. I know what I think about.
Well, I'll go to Neil. The second part of the question was, do social enterprises look at Public Contract Scotland?
Oh, some, but a lot, no. I mean, maybe you could kind of go back to the census, the social enterprise census. It's like, which was, and it's kind of stayed around, what, 20% of bid for contracts. Most of our kind of clients that we've worked with usually say, oh, that PCS, yeah, I've been in it once, or something like that. You might get something along those lines. So maybe they're aware of it. But
I mean, one way, again, just going back to what's included in the scope, you know, buyers want to be as helpful as they can and they can't always give direction, but they can, you know, be helpful in certain aspects. And I always think it is worthwhile to, you know, consider or include that social enterprises might not always or might not at all be on Public Contract Scotland, either looking or registered and set up for alerts and have their profile in place. So at a local level, you know, there are always either, you know, business gateway, third sector interfaces, social enterprise networks, and sometimes it's just highlighting where they can actually go for support. You know, we work at P4P works across Scotland, and we're tied in to all these local sort of partnerships. So, you know, certainly direct people to P4P directly, and we can help navigate them through. But there shouldn't be, you know, no wrong door approach, in the sense that if they're directed through third sector interfaces or the SENS or the gateway, then they should actually be able to be directed to the right area for support and how to get them on. Roddy, do you have anything to add in terms of your experience of social enterprises looking at PCS, Public Contract Scotland?
I suppose the kind of glib answer is you should, and we always encourage people to register. For all we can criticise the procurement process, PCS is a very good resource. It's very easy to register. You can set it up so you get the alerts coming into your office or your email whenever something is posted that is potentially of interest to you. So my experience is probably a little bit different from Neil, but I would say most of the people we talk to are already on Public Contract Scotland. Are they getting the most out of it? That's a different question. But most people are looking to it. And certainly we would encourage people just to take a few minutes, get yourself registered, get your alerts set up, get your supplier finder profile set up. These things aren't that hard to do, but there are people there who can help you. And you mentioned you guys can do that as well. So we would really encourage people to do that for the sake of half an hour, whatever that's going to take.
Yeah.
And you're getting access to an awful lot of information. And I don't want to pre-assume one of your next question or something, Yvonne, as well, but there's things like the annual Meet the Buyer events as well, which seem to alternate between Hampden and Murrayfield. Though I don't know if they're actually going to be physical this year or not, I don't know, but take advantage of those. I mean, it's a great opportunity to take a couple hours out your day and go and talk to buyers, and all you need to do is find one buyer at one stall who's selling something that you might, rather than buying something you might be selling. It's worthwhile. And there's the national ones as well, but there's also the local ones as well. Some local authorities are quite good at doing.
I think that's a really good point, Roddy. Don't just set yourself up and sit back and wait. You know, look for opportunities to engage, find out if you can. I know it's often difficult to navigate, but who the buyers are, you know, have the conversations, get yourself in front of these people, and start to build the relationships, you know, get yourself out there. Any other thoughts before we move on? We don't have any other questions, but I've got a sort of final roundup question just in terms of some of your recommendations.
I have just quickly, in terms of what going back to the first part of that question around specifically mentioning a collaborative approach. So, I mean, you do see it, but it's just it's buried in the tender halfway through. And as you say, Sarah, the words collaboration, what does that actually mean? I think that's really important. So maybe like examples would help. I think more prominence would help. And one thing I was actually thinking about is, can you make it compulsory? Throw that in there. Should collaboration be compulsory?
Collaboration or
so
from social enterprises? That's more.
If it said you have to work as a partnership in whatever kind of form, whether it be like a lead or a sub, or a cooperative, or, you know, because I've seen it the other way. I've worked on tenders where they didn't allow a collaboration at all. It had to only be one organization. So can it work the other way?
That's maybe a full discussion for another.
Just blown our minds.
It's blown. I suspect you might have a bunch of procurement lawyers to give a field day with that as well, about what you could get away with under the regs and stuff. But
yeah, you will work in partnership.
And Michelle likes that.
I'll say I've got all the answers, to be honest. We've got one raised hand. Lorna, if you can, in terms of asking questions, if people can use the chat or the Q&A to ask a question. It's a wee bit different, the format of this, from like a regular Zoom. So on a regular Zoom, obviously you can raise your hand and you get you can then speak on this.
That's good, because I can't see the hands, so yeah.
So I think because I'm technically the host, maybe it's just me that can see the hands. So if you want to ask a question, if you can please just use the chat function or the Q&A, either or.
Okay, well, whilst you're doing that, I just wanted to ask the panel, and we'll just do it the same way again, just a couple of words from Roddy, Sarah, then Neil, just in terms of, if you're to make a couple of recommendations, you know, for both commissioners, buyers, policymakers and social enterprise on strengthening collaboration within the procurement process, what would you say?
Well, I'll go last this time since I stole some of Sarah's thunder.
No, I think I put you first, Roddy. You're not getting out of it that easy.
I suppose to some extent it's just turning things on its head. It's just allowing time for tenders, consulting with the marketplace where that opportunity exists. One area we've not really, I think Neil might have mentioned it briefly, but good use of lotting as well. If you understand where the suppliers are, then you can develop lots or subdivisions in a contract to reflect where those organisations are as well. Sometimes we see bad examples of lotting there. Not putting unreasonable barriers to qualification, and we don't get too technical for this, but there's a thing called the single procurement document, which kind of sets out all the things you've got to have before you can actually bid or be part of a bid. So just thinking very carefully on the buyer side of what goes in there, so that buyer needs to protect themselves as well to make sure that organisations are capable in terms of their capacity to deliver, but not excluding people unnecessarily from that process. And again, maybe going back to something Neil said, making it quite clear that you do welcome collaborative bids as part of the process. But time's a big thing. Collaboration takes time. And if a tender's out with a 5-week deadline and you've not even considered collaborating, it's really, really hard to build a partnership and put an effective bid within that time frame.
Okay, thank you. Sarah? Any recommendations?
Yeah, so for buyers, I think, I mean, when he talks about time, it comes back to this resource question and making it a priority. And I think that comes from the top, doesn't it? And also maybe setting yourself KPIs. So set yourself an objective of, I don't know, X number of social enterprises in your supply chain, or you're going to do X amount of spend with local. And then that helps focus the team towards delivering that objective, if you see what I mean, and that kind of helps drive that activity. But I think it's also about understanding the market and mapping out the social enterprises that are in their either geographical region or if you're Scotland wide, then sector, and working with organisations like P4P and Supply Development Programme and Senscot and Social Enterprise and those kinds of organisations to map out and see what's possible. And then I think there's something that, again, it's all about resource, and at the moment I don't think procurers have the resource to do this, but it's understanding how the products and services they're buying will be delivered, because often you find that the buyers don't have that kind of in-depth level of knowledge about what's behind it, and if they don't know that, then they can't work out where the opportunities are for the social enterprises. So for example, if you know what's in your contract, then it helps you when you go out to the market. So for example, recruitment is a really good one for social enterprise. There are lots of social enterprises that work with people with barriers to employment, and it should be fairly straightforward to get them embedded in supply chains, maybe not directly with you, but maybe with your suppliers. Grounds maintenance, security, cleaning, recycling, stationery, these are all areas where there are a lot of social. I mean, you guys are much more expert in this than me, and you'll probably name like 10 others, but I think it's understanding, you know, where the opportunities are. And then the other thing, once you know what's possible, you can then develop the criteria and score it accordingly in order to get the outcome that you want, so that you can encourage your I mean, I'm coming at this from the sort of private sector as well, but your large private sector companies to go out there and find the social enterprises and embed them, and they will do it if you tell them to. They really will. And then the other thing that I thought is holding a meet the supplier event. So once you've mapped out and you know what the options are, instead of having a meet the buyer where all the suppliers come, you have maybe you've got a contract and you've got a handful, 5 or 6 companies that you know are going to bid for it. Get them to come, and then get your social enterprises to come and meet them, and try and build up the relationships that way. Because when I talk to the large private sector companies, they just don't know what's out there, and when you tell them, they like literally bite your hand off, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be one thing, but doing it like Roddy says, doing it all before you write the scope of the contracts. It's too late. If you renew, if a contract's up for for re-tendering, and you just pick up the old document that you let 5 years ago and you just dust it off. It's what most people do in copy and paste. And again, I'm not judging, because it's tough out there for them, and they're really stretched. You're just not going to be able to change things, which is where the KPIs come in. And then for this, I've talked a lot, but for the social enterprises, I think it would be about saying to them, look at the procurement pipelines that are being published in the annual procurement reports. There's a huge amount of information in those reports. They're really, I mean, they are quite thick, and you have to go looking, but then, you know, that's where the opportunity lies. And look at what contracts you might be able to bid for yourself, and if not, maybe if you can't deliver the whole thing, could you do a bit of it? And again, contact you guys, contact your local authority, contact the buyer, because they do want to embed social enterprise. They're desperate, aren't they? They're really keen to embed social enterprises. So if you can sell to them, they will support you. But there's a bit of quite a bit of communication to be done. And then I think it's using the information that's publicly available to find out who's currently delivering contracts and introducing yourself to them. And if you go through, you know how I said at the beginning, certain parts of large organizations aren't that interested in social value, and certain parts will bite your hand off if you offer it. If you go to the social value person or the sustainability person, and LinkedIn's a brilliant place to meet them, and you pitch to them, they will be absolutely interested in what you've got and what you're selling. And they will open the doors for you to get further into the business, probably where you may actually need to end up being. And then I think it's just making it easy for people to buy from you. So, you know, removing the friction. So whether you're presenting to the procurement team of a local authority, or you're presenting to the procurement team of a multinational company, it's the same, you know, proposal. This is what we sell. This is what you can buy from us. You know, this is how much it costs, type thing. And just ask for a meeting and go and pitch and see what happens. You may not walk out with the thing you went in to sell, but you'll walk out with something, sure.
Yeah, that's a lot of good points in there, Sarah, in terms of obviously engagement, some of the perceptions that are around in terms of the barriers maybe, and just taking opportunities, you know, looking for opportunities where you can to get in front of buyers.
I think for me, maybe I've got rose tinted glasses, but I do think if you're a social enterprise, there's no difference between a social enterprise and any other enterprise, right? They're a business, but they just create more social value. So you actually have an advantage, you know, it's a really big advantage. If you can buy from a cleaning company that's just a normal cleaning company, you can buy from a cleaning company that has a social purpose and creates social value, then you've automatically got an advantage, especially if you're trying to sell into the public sector. But I think it's the same, the challenges that social enterprises face are the same challenges that any small startup every business faces, actually, is business development and winning work, and, you know, all the usual stuff. So I would say take that advantage and use it, because it does exist and it is there.
Okay, thank you. We've got another couple of questions, but before I move on to those, I'll come to Neil for his thoughts and any recommendations that you've got, Neil.
I'm going to do this kind of lawyer thing to begin with, and actually like ignore the question and come and like go to a point first of all on what Roddy was saying, which was around lotting. And I'm going to flip it again, just to be controversial, and I'm going to say lotting can actually discourage collaboration, because if you lot a contract, it means that a lot of the time then you don't need to maybe work as a consortium. So it comes back to that being able to create consortia by kind of forcing people to come together. Anyway.
I think, you know, my line is always about creating that level playing field. So if we've got a lot of small organisations out there and a lot of larger contracts that aren't necessarily have a lotting strategy that makes it open, for those small social enterprise, then one way around that is for organisations to come together. So yeah, it's about creating opportunity, recognising what's out there. But yeah, you're right, the lotting strategy can work both ways.
In terms of recommendations, encouraging it a lot more prominently, not just buried within the tender. I think maybe this might be a bit controversial as well, but I'm all about the kind of just throwing ideas out today. But on a case by cases, if you're not using a PIN, then extending the tender deadline if a collaborative bid is likely. If it's not likely, then fair enough. Or just give much more notice, more like in terms of PINs. Some buyers are good at using PINs, some aren't, and there might be good reasons for not using one as well, but it does help the sector or any other business. I think when I worked with one group last year, they bid as an informal kind of consortium, and then they formalized their structure once they were successful, and that was only because that particular occasion, the local authority allowed an implementation period of a few months post the tender to actually formalize their structures. So that actually relies on a buyer that's like quite progressive minded. But if that hadn't happened, there wouldn't have been enough time. And maybe also another kind of idea, extra points for collaborating in the tender.
Okay. Well, food for thought. We've got another couple of questions. You know, some of the issues that buyers might have is how to include signpost social value to potential suppliers. So, you know, what would be the response to that? So how to include social value to potential suppliers? I'm not really sure about that.
I wasn't sure, but what I think, Lorna, if you're here, just and you want to clarify in the chat, but what I think that she means is how to identify this kind of social value that they can get from specific contracts. I think, Lorna, is that what you meant? Hopefully, is that what Roddy, Neil, Yvonne, does that sound?
That sounds,
Yeah.
I certainly think that would be
that is quite common,
that is a
isn't
common
it? Yeah, it's really common, and it comes back to understanding the contract.
Yeah.
And just where the opportunities are. I often say it's about understanding where the negative impact might be being created and that you can remove, and how you might be able to have a positive impact through delivery of a contract. You can't do that if you don't know what you really need to lift the hood and get underneath it. So yeah, you really do. You have to, I'll give you an example. I was working on a bid recently for a really large data center contract, and I was working for the supplier, and I said to them how they said, well, the problem with this contract is it's all data centers and they're just big warehouses with computers in them.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's all in the cloud. No, actually they said to me it's all in the cloud, and I said, well, it's not really all in the cloud, is it? What are they actually buying in the real world that gives the thing in the cloud? Because I don't know about data centers. And they looked at me and they were like, well, we'll get someone to come in, and they wheeled out this, like, you know, computer technical person, and I said, what happens? How do you deliver your cloud-based services? And he's like, oh, well, we have data centers. And I was like, okay, now what do they look like? And he literally took me through. You had to sort of literally go and open the door and look in the data center and work out how are they powered, how are they cleaned, how, you know what I mean, what happens to the equipment when it's finished with, where does it, you really literally go into the detail of how that the money that person is spending with you, how do you deliver those products and services, and then where are the data centers located, and you know, how do you employ people to work in them, you know, everything really. You just think about it and really.
Yeah. And
that's what you have to do with the contracts, look at it through that lens. But it's a big thing to do. It's exciting, but
yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right. We always think in the widest sense, you know, where are the opportunities? to be able to deliver that social value, and you know, and particularly supply chain, which has been a bit more of a challenge,
Yeah.
for social enterprise to get into.
Oh, Lorna's said something else, Yvonne.
In a tender, we may give a list of all suitable social enterprises that can deliver services that we want, but the collaboration between supplier and the social enterprises will be between themselves. Absolutely, I think it's about encouraging that, or putting that to the suppliers, that you would welcome collaboration. You know, sometimes people need to see it in black and white and need to know that that's okay to be able to go down that road and to do that, and equally that you will give that time to do it, and you know the scope will allow for them to be able to do that collectively.
I think in that.
Any other thoughts, Roddy or Neil?
I'd probably just reiterate to a large extent what Sarah said. It is down to the contract and the service that's being purchased, and some things do, or some services or contracts do lend themselves more to social value or community benefit, if we want to go down the community benefit clause road, more than others. I suppose going back, my involvement, this goes back to pre-Commonwealth Games, when those big construction contracts were being let. And construction was great because in employment you don't have to worry about toupee, because they're one-off things. We're going to build a velodrome, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So it was relatively easy to put in clauses and encourage employment of disadvantaged people, long-term unemployed people, so on and so forth. And there was some attempt as well to create supply chain there. Service contracts can be more problematic, but and you won't always have somebody like Sarah, for an example, about the techie company with its data farms, whatever you call them, can't remember what the word was as well. But it does take a little bit of effort and value as well. I mean, as a bidder, we actually were responding to a Scottish government contract, pretty low value stuff, and they were looking for a community benefit. And so, well, this is about £40,000. There's only so much we can do. There's a few things we can do, but you sometimes wonder what's the buyer's expectation here for these sort of low value pieces of work. So there's not really an easy answer. It just takes a little bit of time and thought about where is the social value in this service.
I think that's the beauty of a social enterprise, is that it's the community belief that is inbuilt into the way they deliver their products and services. It's not added, you know. So that you give a £40,000 contract to a social enterprise, you're going to get way more social impact for that bang for your buck than you would if you gave it to X, you know, large private sector company.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. So Ian's asked about knowing the opportunities and the types of opportunities available are key to social enterprises applying. I think that's probably in reference to maybe some of the forward procurement plans, or you know, having those early stage conversations, pin notices out. I think we would all agree with that, but I'm not sure if anybody in the panel wants to comment on perhaps how that could be improved and how that could be communicated out to the sector and to others.
I suppose information could be made more accessible. There'll always be, I guess, part of the responsibility on us as bidders, our prospective bidder, to do a little bit of legwork to find out what those forthcoming opportunities are. We have got the annual procurement strategies and the forward plans, and now the backward-looking annual procurement reports, which public sector organisations are required to bid, and they're useful tools. But again, they're all presented a little bit differently. Some of them are easy to access, some of them aren't easy to access, and even then when you read them, you've got to try and dissect the information that's relevant for you as well. So making those more standardised, more accessible, easier to read would probably help. But somebody else said, it might be Sarah, might be Neil, about also building relationships. If you're based in Glasgow City Council, you want to be building a relationship with the commissioners who are in your field within the City Council, so you get their thoughts and you very quickly understand where they are and what contracts are currently let, when they're going to come up, and what the commissioning cycle is as well. So but that takes time as well. You've got to invest that time in building those relationships and getting in front of those people.
I think it's fair to say as well that, when we're looking at the public sector and, say, for instance, local authorities, that within each local authority there'll be different ways of actually commissioning and buying. So in some local authorities it'll be very centralised, for example. In others there'll be hundreds of buyers out there. So I can understand it's a challenge sometimes to get to the right people, and some local authorities have actually published, who the contact people are for particular sectors, or who the particular buyers are, and that's really useful. And I think that communication flow is crucial to all of this at each stage of the process and the cycle, and just keeping that communication and engagement going. We don't seem to have any more questions, so I'm not sure if there's any final thoughts or any burning issues that maybe are there, Sarah.
I had Roddy, you made me think of something. You're talking about the reports. So they come out in the summer, don't they? There's like a certain time of the year where they come out, and it just struck me that the moment I think, and again, if somebody does this differently, I'd love to hear about it. But I think most people just submit them, don't they, to the government and then put them on their websites. But you could, if you're a procurer, you could hold just a virtual event like this, like a webinar or an event like this, and present your report and explain what's in it, and with a focus on the pipeline of the opportunities that are coming up for the next year, and target the audience at social enterprises and local firms, small local businesses in your area, and use that. That would be a one-off thing, sort of like a launch event for your report, an annual thing. Do it virtually, so it's not hugely resource intensive, and just did it one a year. That's not too, because I am conscious they haven't got huge amounts of resources. Yeah. What do you think? They could get P4P to organise it for them.
That's interesting. Obviously, Meet the Buyers, Roddy made reference to, and others made reference to Meet the Buyers, and I think, yes, that opportunity is there and everybody should make use of it, but it's not always an ideal setting. It's a busy setting at times. It's difficult to get the audience, and you need to be prepared to, if you're selling what you're selling and what your case is that you're putting across. So yeah, I mean, obviously the last 18 months has made us very technical and Zoom friendly or Teams friendly, and so it's another added incentive, I suppose, and encouraging organisations to actually engage with buyers. So yeah, we'd be up for that.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a really interesting idea. Yeah.
I think in terms of the annual reports, they do get published in a central place now. I think that's a relatively development. But sometimes the format of it's not too helpful for suppliers. So how much information you get in the report can be very variable. Sometimes you get even looking at
they do vary.
Sometimes you get a year. So it does vary, and I know that it's not that easy to put a date on things quite a lot. So
okay, so I don't think, let me just check, I don't think we have any other questions, so I'll just finish up now, and thanks to everyone for joining us today, for posting your questions, and hopefully we've given you food for thought. You can always get in touch with us if there's anything else or any other questions for the panel, and we can put them to them. Thank you for the panel for their input today, and taking the time out. And what I would say is, do join us for the rest of the week, obviously through to Friday. We've got a varied programme around different themes for each day. And you can see that programme and sign up through the P4P website, which is p4p.org.uk, and look out for us on social media and follow us and retweet and do all that stuff that gets collaboration and procurement back out again into the arena and profile. So thank you. That's us. As I say, you can view the recording on the YouTube channel. And thanks again. Have a good day, everyone.